Good morning. I'm Suzanne Ratty, and this is Smart Women Professionals. Great topic today. We've got four lovely ladies here from the Smart Women Professionals Network. And we're going to be talking about your people, your office, and productivity. That's going to touch on everything from HR issues to space in your office to commercial real estate, which is a hot topic right now. And want to introduce all the ladies that are with us today. So let's kick it off. Laura, tell us about you and where you're coming from today.
Good morning. I'm Laura Schlick. I'm the Business Development Director with NFD, Interior Architectural Planning and Design. We do mostly all commercial design. We've been doing that since 1978. So we know a little bit about what's going on.
All right. And how about Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Cherry. I'm the Vice President of Office Leasing for the Howard Hughes Corporation. Our largest development in this region is downtown Columbia, and I'm excited to talk about some trends I'm seeing in commercial real estate.
And roughly, Karen, how much square footage do you have under your portfolio there?
We have about 2 million square feet in downtown Columbia currently, and a pipeline to develop up to 14 million square feet of new product.
So you got a little bit of space.
A little bit, yeah.
And Kelly, tell us about you.
Yes, good morning. Kelly Mitchell. I'm the principal consultant and founder of Impact HR. We're a full-service HR consulting and advisory firm based in Columbia, but our client base pretty much across the whole region here in DC, Northern Virginia, and Maryland, but we do have clients across the country as well. And we support them on compliance issues, workplace issues, employee engagement issues. So a good topic for me to get engaged in this morning.
Sounds awesome. I know when interviewing each of you for this, I really liked all of the different perspectives you have, because I think the biggest challenge facing any business today is, the people. How do we keep our people engaged? How do we manage that process? The productivity, whether it's virtual working or bringing people back into the office. And then specifically as it relates to commercial real estate, giving folks an update, like what's commercial real estate really look like right now, and what can we expect over the next, let's say, year or so. So let's dig right in. The first question I wanted to throw out to you guys is, what is the biggest impact that COVID has had and the whole new normal concept has had on your specific client base? And I'm going to kick it off, go right to the meat of it, and start with commercial real estate with Karen.
Why am I not surprised? I'm first on this topic. So it has been an interesting evolution of how our tenants are looking at, commercial real estate in the waves of the COVID world today. So, when we thought the shutdown was just going to be a couple of weeks, people just kind of went to virtual working, and, everybody thought it was a very temporary situation. Now that we're several months into it, and it looks like there will be, for most companies, several months more of virtual working entirely. People are looking at, okay, how do we incorporate some of these best practices that we've been doing the last couple of months while we're working virtually into an ongoing solution for our company? And so I think, there's been a lot of press about commercial real estate and is the office market dead? And, what I'm seeing from my as well as new companies that we're working with who are looking for office space is that no, the office market isn't dead. However, the office market is going to be changed. And companies are still in that process of trying to figure out what are temporary changes and what are long-term changes. And when you think about some of those long-term changes, you really have to start and understand that virtual working is going to be incorporated into most companies' strategies going forward. And so how does that change what the office looks like? I do believe that offices will continue to exist. So the office market isn't dead. But the way that the companies use their office space is going to be different going forward. So for example, the office space may be a gathering space. Once it's safe to come back and be more than a couple of people inside in a confined space, companies are going to be looking for their office space to create culture, because it is very difficult. And I think Kelly will touch on these things a little bit later in our conversation, but it's difficult to build culture in an organization where everybody is in different places and looking at each other over computer screens. So the office needs to be that facility that will then enable more of a cultural building, so that as you're adding new people into the organization, they feel like they're part of something instead of just, this disconnected part of a virtual world that we're in currently.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's going to require a lot of innovation, innovative strategies. And that probably ties right in with Laura and what she's seeing in the office design world. Talk to us about that, Laura.
Yeah, in the beginning, as Karen said, it was sort of a short-term thing. And we saw a lot of people kind of put the brakes on, hey, we're looking for space, and hey, we want a whole bunch of space. And so, yeah, it definitely impacted our business that way. But as time has gone on, people have definitely started to go ahead and proceed with plans that they had. We've moved multiple people in even during this time, and not small spaces, 10,000 square feet or so. And we're seeing, even larger companies still moving forward. They're going through it in a thoughtful process, like, okay, hey, how we now are working remotely, how did that change, or did that change how we're going to work going forward? I mean, there was so much data prior to COVID that talked about, like, look, the workplace is so much more than a place to do work. And I think that part of the reason why so many companies potentially were so successful at this, remote working, besides the fact that we all just got shoved into it, right? We had no choice. So we're all pretty, we're pretty dynamic people, and we can all roll pretty well with, when we're hit with a crisis, which is what that was. But were we really feeding off of a lot of what many companies had already built in, which was, we had this culture, we had this great culture, we had this society that we had built, and we had the friendships. And so when we had to move away and go virtual, we had a bank basically that we could draw from to help us be successful. And then technology, then also we all got a lot better at that, like me. Now I know how to do Zoom, sort of. So I think it's going to still be evolving. No, we are not seeing spaces shrinking. Karen was dead on with, right, it's going to evolve some. There will be some remote working definitely implemented within all probably companies. I mean, and that just flexibility and adaptability, right? Like, but again, we were already talking about that. We already had all the data about that. It was, we were really starting to push that ourselves, that spaces have got to be flexible and adaptable, because technology changes daily, and technology is going to be one of the hugest drivers in all the facets of how we do business. So then implementing that into our space to let the space really work for us, I mean, that's what smart businesses are going to be doing and looking at.
Yeah. And, you brought up a good point when we were conducting kind of our pre-interviews, that you're not one of those people that can work virtually, that you need that office structure. And I think that ties and provides a nice segue to Kelly, because, the fact of the matter is, while we all like working from home and we all like Zoom and virtual work environments, the fact is there is a large portion of our population and our workforce that really needs that structure or day-to-day interaction. So Kelly, talk to us about what you're seeing.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And 100% agree with you, Suzanne. When this all first started, going back to what Laura just said about, we kind of all got kind of pushed into this, right? That we were forced to do this. We had to put everyone outside of the office. And the challenge for most companies in the beginning was they weren't prepared for it, right? They weren't prepared with all of the technology, all of the equipment, getting people set up in their homes to be able to be productive. I do think that, like Laura said, everyone's been adapting to this, and they're succeeding with having employees working remotely. But the cultural piece is really big. I think companies now are challenged with, how do we kind of reinforce our culture now that everyone's so spread apart and they don't have that social interaction anymore. Recently I read an article that said that there was a survey that came out, and I believe a couple thousand employees said that their burnout level from working from home now has just like tripled, from while they were, from when they were working in the office space. And I think that is a critical issue right now for employers. It's not really the productivity level per se, because I do think for the most part, employees are being probably more productive working from home, because everyone's just so like frozen in front of their computers all day long. But the challenge now is that it's the mental wellness, right? And then you have those parents that have children running around at home and trying to, help them with their education. And it's just all of the home life, work balance is playing a heavy toll on people. And I think that, one of the challenges, I know we're going to touch on this a little bit more, but one of the challenges really, how do we get people to be less burnt out, during the day? What are some of those strategies that employers can implement to help people kind of have a better balance? Especially those that have the children from home, trying to help them with their education while still trying to get their work done. So, in the beginning, yes, we've adapted, we were flexible, we got people set up to be able to work from home effectively. Now that this has kind of gone on for months and months and months, now the challenge is, okay, yes, productivity, people are doing their work, but we're sensing that they're probably maybe a little bit more disengaged now because it's been so long for this. And then, the challenge is we don't know when this is going to end. And so what do we need to do to make sure that we are reinforcing our culture? What's the communication look like with our people? And then more importantly, are we actually being authentic about, reaching out to people, talking to them, and really truly finding out what are their challenges while working from home and what can we as the employers do better to help them, right? So,
and I think you're right, Kelly. Even what I've been seeing in my own company is, teams, it's difficult to build a team and build that loyalty with the team when everything is unknown right now. And so, when I'm reaching out to my teammates, and I'm saying, how are you doing? How is everything going? Are they really telling me, oh, I'm great, things are good, I'm working from home, everything's great, I'm very productive, I'm happy, are they really telling you the true story? Or are they just trying to sugarcoat it to make it sound like everything's good here, don't worry about me?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the things that I implemented myself with my team is that, I do touch base. And I think like most of us or all of us, we have the technology to do that, right? Whether it's Teams, whether it's, the Zoom calls, whatever it might be, we do tend to have that communication. We're touching base with employees. One of the things that I implemented several months ago, because I found that when I was touching base with my employees, it was about work stuff, right? It was about, these are things that are happening, what are you doing to support this client? One of the things I implemented was to start each conversation by asking them, tell me one thing that you plan on doing for yourself today. Is it to take your dog for a walk? Is it to, go sit outside on your deck and enjoy the sun for an hour or so? Because I do think it kind of gets them their mindset off of go, 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 and really think about, yeah, I really need a break, from this. So I would encourage employers to really ask that question that's personal, right? And ask them, what are they going to be doing? Just take a mental break.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads into one of our next questions, which is, it is not normal for people not to have social interaction.
Yes.
Right? That's not normal on any level, and no matter what the new normal looks like, it's not normal to not have social interaction. So Kelly, I think it's an interesting point, because as business owners, we're focused on productivity. But there are things like when we typically onboard somebody, there's a social element to introducing them around the office, to the coffee station, to what, the social interaction. So, to Laura for just a minute, how are you seeing the social impacts of COVID when it comes to office design spaces? What are you doing to recreate or rethink maybe our old office environments for more of that social interaction when we do get people back in, or even in a virtual setting?
Well, we had been, there's so much data on the importance of the social aspects, just tons of statistics. So we obviously cannot move away from all that data, which was proof. I mean, in 2017, IBM stopped their remote working and brought everybody back. I mean, even the younger generations, the Gen Zers, the millennials, all preferred face-to-face interaction over, any form of technology interaction. So we already knew that. Now that we've sort of been forced to go to this, this remoteness, I think businesses have to be considering, unless based on where you're located, you can't get back to work at all. You can't have any of your people. I think really strategizing, how the technology and the changes in the technology work specifically within your business, but all businesses. I don't really think there's any business that does anything that could ever stay remote all the time, because then your people are a commodity. We all know, again, statistically, it costs so much money when you have to retrain, rehire, and it's hard to find good people. I talked to tons of different types of businesses in all aspects. So we can't afford to lose people, because if they're sitting home behind my computer and doing work, then I can go to the next company for another $1 or $2 an hour. I don't belong to anything, right? And so that culture and that mission, and that's something that I thrive, like you said, right? People are social beings. That's how we were designed. So I can't stay in my house forever by myself and not be part of something. So how are we going to make these businesses stay? Sure. So again, building in flexibility and adaptability, where the lunchroom is maybe not just a lunchroom. It's a very open area that we can use flexible walls and dividers and things with very flexible furniture, so that can become a large meeting room, that can become smaller meeting rooms, that can become collaboration spaces, that we can social distance as we need to. Is there going to be another pandemic? Hopefully not for another 100 years again, but but things happen, right? And all that. So just again, building in that flexibility, but it is so critical that businesses really understand that your culture, it was already super important, whether you were paying attention to it and whether you realized it or not. So keeping that an important, and let's get these people in a staggered format, half of the staff, a quarter of the staff coming back several times a week and having the chance to socialize and all, I think is going to make every business much more successful.
And I think, Laura brings up an important point, that as companies are looking for office space from now on, the office is going to be, again, a much different driver than it was before. So companies had already started thinking about their office space as a recruiting and retention tool, which is why, areas that are highly amenitized and walkable are much more attractive than, your traditional suburban office park that you'd have to get in a car to go get a sandwich for lunch, for an example. So as the companies are looking for what is their next office move, whether that's a renewal where they are, or whether that's, moving somewhere else, they really have to think about, how are the employees going to view the office space? And is that a positive? Does that help create loyalty in your employee base? Or is it going to be detrimental, and the employees will be looking for, another office that, as Laura said, will pay $1 or $2 more, an hour, or are they looking for an office where they have a shorter commute? Now everybody is used to a commute from upstairs to downstairs. So commute times may become a bigger factor for employees when considering who to work for in the future. Things like, do I have to go into work and then get in my car to then go get a sandwich again for lunch? So a lot of different factors are going to come into the decision-making process of where is my next office going to be located.
Yeah, and if I could just add on top of both of that, Laura mentioned about, the younger generation, I guess, in terms of the workforce. That is an important thing for employers to think about is when it comes to office space and the redesign and is the demographics of your workforce, right? So you might have the younger generation that all they do is work, right? They don't have children running around the office or at home. And then you have the older generation that they might be responsible for their parents or their children. And so the idea of, trying to get everyone back into the office is probably not going to work for everyone. We know that, right? And so employers have to be very flexible. One of the things that I wanted to just touch on what Karen just said, though, is that, as employers are looking at modifying the space, office space, or as employees are looking at, is this going to work for me coming back into the office space? One of the things that some of the employees will think about is the safety of that, right? As my employer's asking me to come back, am I comfortable with the way the office space is redesigned or it's set up today? Laura mentioned the walls, the blockers, all of those things that employers might be doing today, but that may not be comfortable. If people may not be comfortable with that and they want a bigger open space, they want the opportunity to be 6 feet apart at all times. And so a lot of things I think employers need to think about, especially when it comes to the office design, right, in their office space and how they're going to bring people back in.
Yeah. And, Kelly, I think, I don't know if this is for you or Laura, but when you're talking about the office space environment and virtual working, I know a lot of organizations are looking at kind of A teams and B teams where they can kind of bring back a portion of the workforce on certain weeks. What does that look like from a logistical standpoint, from a social standpoint? What do you guys think that looks like?
Well, if I could just jump in there, yeah. I want to share with you a story about with one of my clients. This company decided that, I believe back in August, they were going to just reopen the office space and they were going to have all of their employees come back to the office. And they were strategizing about how should this look? Should we do kind of what you mentioned, this A team, B team, and then alternate weekly? And what they decided to do was reach out to their employees and ask them, if we were to reopen the office, would you be comfortable coming back, provided that we have done all of these things to be compliant with all of the safety requirements? And to their surprise, a large portion of their employees raised their hands and said that they're ready. They want to come back to the office, provided that all of the safety measures were put in place by the employer. So, I think that employers are being creative about bringing people back into the office space. I think that there's still challenges with that. And it really is, again, going to what I just said a little while ago about comfort level for employees. People are viewing this, the perception of this pandemic, it varies, right? Some people might feel like, yeah, I think I'm good. I can go venture out and I'm okay with coming to the office. Other people are, nope, I'm not ready yet. I'm still like, I want to be in this home and I don't want anyone near me because they're afraid of it. And I believe the most effective way to do this and bring people back is, again, ask them, right?
Because I love the survey idea. I've heard that a few times where folks are sending out surveys where employees can reply about their comfort level, and then making decisions based on that, and even month by month.
I'm sorry. And then one of the things too on that, the survey is a great idea because I think it's a way for employees to feel like they're being heard. So the survey shouldn't be just about, are you comfortable coming back to the office? It should be, do you have the right tools? Do you have the right resources? What could we be doing better for you, right? Because there is no social interaction, right? We're not having the person-to-person meetings. But it also, I think, is a good way to do personal outreaches to your employees individually, right? I want to know really that you have everything that you need so that you can be productive, you're engaged, and that you feel like we're taking care of you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is to Laura or Karen more so. Are we seeing any trends specifically for those with children where we're incorporating any sort of, I don't want to call it daycare, but some sort of environment where we say, okay, we need more space because what we're going to do is set up a learning center for the kids, and we're going to have the parents work here. Is there any of that going on out there?
I haven't seen that. Laura, have you?
No, I have not seen that at all.
So we haven't seen it yet, but do we think that, does that sound like a good idea, or what do you guys think about that?
Again, I think I go back to what Kelly just said, in that you really have to treat each person individually. And so, if you're a large organization that has thousands of employees, that might be an option for you. But realistically, in this region, we have very few of those, right? And so most companies, have 20 to 50, maybe 100 employees, and it's a much more manageable task. So surveying those and treating each individual separately, I think is a much more realistic approach when you have a smaller workforce. So, I just want to caveat it with that. But I think that, you have to take into account, again, location of, real estate is all about location, right? So I'll use an example of my daughter, who's 24. She lives in Chicago, and she takes public transportation to work. She is uncomfortable, regardless of what the office looks like when she gets there. She's uncomfortable because of the risk of her just getting to the office. And so there are so many other factors. When you think about, do you have a high-risk individual in your home? You personally may not be, but what are the other people who you would be, putting at risk by going back into an office setting? So I think there will be a time eventually where companies can say, everybody has to come back to the office, and, this is just the way that we're going to move, but we're not there yet. We are in a place where we need to be meeting people where they are with their comfort level, understanding each individual challenge that person has, and then accommodating for them. It's a very intensive process to do that, but that will create loyalty with your work staff. So when you're thinking about, again, going back to recruiting and retention, it's so much easier to keep the employees that you have. Do what you need to do right now to make sure that your work staff feels supported from the emotional, the physical, the technology, all of those areas need to be met. Your employees are looking for those factors to be met.
Yeah, and I think that, employers need to be flexible, right, Karen? Like you said, right? It's flexibility is key right now. And I'm not just talking about, just, in terms of how are you going to rearrange the office space, but really about understanding and getting out of this old school mentality about everyone's got to be in the office, physically there to be productive. And we've seen over the last, 6-7 months that is not the case. And especially now with the challenges that most people are faced with working from home and working remotely, employers have to be very flexible as they're deciding when they're going to start reopening or when they're going to start bringing people back, whether it's on an alternating schedule, whether it's a hybrid schedule, whatever the case might be, because not everyone is going to be able to do that regardless of how you set that up because of their own personal situation, right? And so employers have to be very flexible.
So I think that brings to mind an important question, though. And that is, so when I was talking with Laura initially, she was like, I had to get back to the office because I was not productive at home. So in a situation where let's just say that the next 3 months people have got to stay virtual, how do we ensure productivity, especially for those who are more challenged being productive virtually? And Kelly, that's in your wheelhouse, I'm sure. I know Jerry Sandusky came out with an app not too long back that was to monitor and provide more feedback to employees on a more regular, even a daily basis. What are the things that you're seeing or recommending out there for clients to ensure productivity?
It's the flexibility, as I mentioned, right? So we have clients that have their work schedule for their employees to be a little bit more flexible. So it's not, from 8 to 5 type of schedule, right? It is understanding that, they may have to step away from 8 to 10 to help their children with their online schooling. And so maybe their day starts a little bit later with that. So it's, again, going back to the flexibility of how you're asking people to work is key. I also think that, in terms of the productivity level, I think employers need to understand that people are productive, right? And I think especially now in this remote space, it's easier for them to be productive because they're not interrupted all day, right? Unless they have the children and those responsibilities. But the productivity levels have what we've seen since all of this started has increased with people. It hasn't decreased. The challenge now is, are they going to burn out, right? Are we going to lose these people because they're doing way too much every day, not just from a work perspective, but everything else that's going on in their personal lives? And so it's that mental wellness that employers have to be a little bit more mindful of now moving forward, because again, we don't know when this is going to end. We don't know how much longer your people are going to be working remotely and being secluded and not having the social interactions like they used to. So it's being mindful of what are some of the things that we can be doing to help them with their mental wellness. And, one of the things, like I said, is encourage them, take a break, right? It's okay for you to step away, right? Not answer those emails for 15, 20 minutes, go outside. Because I think that personal touch and that personal level of communication is important for people.
Yeah, and a lot of the clients that I advise on is more for sales strategy. And one of the things I advise clients to do is for accountability and productivity. In salespeople are naturally on their own half the time anyway. So virtual working is no big deal, but it's keeping them motivated. It's keeping them engaged. So while Kelly's talking about flexibility, what's going through my head is salespeople have always said flexibility, but now more than ever, what they really need is accountability. And, I know when I had sales teams, we had a daily huddle call. Every single morning we got on the call. We talked about what we needed to accomplish for the day. It was a great way to kind of create that engagement, but it also created a level of accountability. Like, okay, you're going to make 20 phone calls today, or okay, you're looking to close this deal by the end of the week. What can I do to help you? I cannot iterate enough how important that accountability factor is. While we always use that in sales teams, I'm telling clients, hey, for your operations team, for your call center, for whoever it is, that kind of a daily huddle brings people that social interaction that they need and that engagement that they need. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, an end of day huddle. Maybe if you have an operations team or an administrative team, having an end of the day huddle to see where everybody is, what are the challenges they had, is a great way to kind of manage time. Because when we used to do that in some of the organizations that I've worked with previously, and again, some of the clients I'm advising now, that end of the day huddle, even for a leadership team, it says hold everything till close to the end of the day. Maybe it's a 3 o'clock huddle. Hold everything, and that way you're not interrupting me all day, or you're not trying to reach me while I'm trying to do other things. And that 3 o'clock huddle call with a leadership team, for example, everybody knows that's where we're going to bring our problems or our challenges. That's where we're going to resolve and make decisions. And now everybody's not constantly going back and forth trying to reach out and try to answer and respond to. So I have particularly found that's really helpful to organizations that are trying to create some level of cohesion in the virtual work cycle. Anybody else have experience with that?
Oh, yeah, I would agree with you. I think that, and what I'm hearing from you and what I think is important for employers is to have a set schedule for your people, right? It's don't interrupt, because I think that creates a little bit of stress for people, is when you're trying to reach out to someone and it's not scheduled per se. But that schedule is very helpful for employees. So Suzanne, like you said, it's if everyone knows, your team knows, 8:30 every morning, we're going to do a 15-minute group huddle, right? Or 3:30, 4 o'clock at the end of the day, we're just going to do a quick 20-minute catch up for what happened during the day, resources that you might need, what the team can do to support each other. That also sets that mental level for people, is I have this set schedule. I know I need to be up and ready by 8:30, or I need to be ready by 3:30, 4 o'clock for my call. It keeps them on a routine. And routine is important right now for people, right? Because of all of the things that are going on. So I do see a lot of that. I think most, if not all, employers are doing some type of a touch base with their employees. How you do that, I think, is key, right? Again, going back to what I said earlier about being authentic, being transparent. What are the calls really about? Is it just so we're going to be chit-chatting for 15 minutes? Because that might not work for some people, right? And some people might welcome that. But you don't know what's going to be effective for your people unless you actually talk to them and find out, what could I be doing better as a manager, as an employer, to support you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's switch gears for a minute. So each of you have different, Laura and Karen may have some overlap, but each of you have different client bases. And the size and organizations of those companies is different. There's even solopreneurs out there who don't have big offices or lots of staff, but they still have some of these same issues and requirements. So what I'd like to talk about for just a minute is, as it relates specifically to your client base, what are you doing to help businesses adapt? So let me start out with Laura. What are you specifically doing to help your clients right now?
Well, I think even prior to this, that the companies who got it, the smart companies, were really engaging professionals to help them really process through, think through, question, engage employees in the discussions of, how do we work? What is our mission? How can we use our space to continue what our mission is, to reflect our culture and support our culture with the use of the space? Bringing in COVID, okay, so a lot of us are virtual, but even with COVID, how can that space still support that culture? How can we? And so just really engaging in some in-depth, we have gobs of questionnaires and things that we put out to companies when they want to, go through this process. And it also helps with, size. How, some companies don't even know how much space they need. And now I think, that's always, obviously Karen and I both always, is the office going to shrink? Is the office going to get bigger? Is the guy probably going to say the same? Probably. Because we're probably just going to use space potentially a little bit differently and build in that more flexibility, adaptability that I was talking about. But probably if you were about a certain size, and maybe you need to go through that process to help figure that out, you're probably still going to be about that same size. But I mean, people.
Are you reconfiguring spaces to have more social distance?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, some of the companies are putting a little bit, so benching was kind of a big thing, which was where, tables and desks were kind of just in a long line facing each other, not really much divider, or very little dividers. That's probably going away to a degree. I mean, there's portable plexiglass dividers out there. There's sound absorption dividers out there that you can, you can use now and then put away for later, for when the next, thing hits. But that'll definitely probably go away for at least a little while. But no, as far as, everybody's not all of a sudden now going to be back into private offices. Again, I think everybody, there is no one size fits all for space in companies. Okay. So Google and Facebook can do some really cool things, fabulous things in their companies. They can also afford to absorb, hey, our people can all stay remotely and I don't, hey, and they can have total paid time off for however long they want. But most of us in normal companies, especially the small businesses, I mean, we can't absorb those kinds of free-for-all costs and things. So our space has to really work and help performance help employees be more productive, help the whole business be productive. I mean, that's ultimately what a good workspace is. It's not just a place to house people.
And when people are coming back right now with these A/B teams, are they generally putting people like every other cubicle or something like?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So some people are going to every other cubicle. Yes, exactly. That type of thing. Just a staggered entry with staggered where you're sitting. Yeah, again, all dependent on, what's so half of a team, half of let's say a call center team, you're going to wind up with a lot less people and you're going to be able to have that distance. So again, it's what works for your business and what's going to be successful, and just having those conversations to help people. Yeah, I mean, because you have to, like Kelly said, you've got to make people feel safe, and that you have all the extremes, the ones who don't care, don't wear the mask, you know what I mean? And the other people who it's really a thing. They're very, nervous about the whole thing. And so you have to, how do we balance and make everybody
You think bullpens from the 90s are going to go away?
Well, the bullpens from the 90s were probably going away anyway.
Yeah.
Going away, but again, because it shouldn't just be about housing people, but at some point in time, it is about space per person and what works for your business. You know what I mean? If people do need higher walls because they're making phone calls all day long and they do need to be able to sort of heads down, then, an 8-foot cubicle might be okay for them. Probably not. We probably can bring it down a little bit and let some daylight in, but.
Let's switch gears for a minute. Karen, so there's been a lot of discussion in some of the groups that I'm involved with who are more small business, solopreneurs, or small businesses that have a few employees and they're turning more towards this virtual environment. A lot of discussion around, but people who work from home and solopreneurs need social interaction too. Do you think that one suggestion I heard recently, which I thought was really innovative, hey, why don't we take shopping malls and make them into like these in-person office malls where, we have like a segment of people who can just rent a small little space, but they have food courts. What kinds of innovative things are you seeing maybe for the smaller business to create long-term engagement for virtual workers?
So, it's really interesting because I think right now the whole industry is trying to figure out what does that look like. And there are a lot of creative ideas that are out there. I've heard the mall idea as well, because, retail obviously is having its own challenges, and that's a subject for another day. We've seen some struggles in the co-working environment in that, Regus has declared bankruptcy for several of its entities, and WeWork is giving back office space in a lot of its markets. So that co-working trend seems to be changing a little bit. I don't think it'll go away, but I think it will change. So I think those small companies who are looking for the social engagement are going to need to find other ways to provide that for their employees. Now, whether that's, having a collaborative hub that everybody goes to, and whether that's a shared environment or whether that's a leased, dedicated to that organization. I think, each company kind of needs to figure that out. But I think it's interesting. There is a lot of thought going into what do those small companies that only have a handful of employees, what kinds of things can they incorporate into their business models when it comes to office space, but really when it comes to just the way that they're going to run their companies going forward. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know that we have any answers today, but I'm sure Lara is doing as much as I am, kind of watching some of the global experts try and figure out what some of these creative solutions are. I just wanted to touch back on what Lara was talking about previously in the office space and adapting. It's really important who your landlord is right now, because companies can create a comfort level within the space that they lease, but they have very little control over what the building is doing. And I think that's really an important factor in creating employees' comfort levels and coming back to the office. We have seen some companies come back to the office. So we've been talking mostly about, everybody's virtual right now. Well, everybody's not. There are about 30 to 40% of our employees in downtown Columbia are back in the office, at least on some regularity. So companies are living through this now, coming back to the office. And what does that look like? What are their mask policies? What is the building doing from an HVAC perspective? And it's really important to engage your landlord in those conversations. And if the landlord is, doing a good job of communicating that to whoever the contact is at the organization, they need to be disseminating that information to the employees. It's really important to understand like I said before, all of the factors of what goes into making an employee feel comfortable. And I think there are building factors that companies can't control that they need to understand and really have an open, frank dialogue with landlords. Don't be afraid to start that conversation with your landlord because I work for a landlord. We are having those conversations and we're actually initiating those conversations because we want our employees and our tenants to feel comfortable coming back to the office.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. I have a client, Rich Beatty over at MEC, and they have a really cool new product that landlords can put on their HVAC equipment that helps destroy bacteria. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like, why wouldn't you make that investment? Yes, it's an investment. Yes, there's a cost associated, but it just seems like such a no-brainer to help bring people back to the office. Again, maybe not today, but maybe in the next few months. And, that kind of probably ties into something a little off topic, but that is from the social perspective. I had somebody ask me the other day, will we ever go back to handshakes?
I will.
I'm like, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, is the culture going to change that much? But
yeah, for me, it's the hugs. Are we ever going to go back to the hugs?
Right.
Me too, Kelly.
Thinking about this product that Rich was telling me about, I think we're going more towards a culture of what can we do once the pandemic's over to make our culture, our society, our offices a little more healthy and a little bit more not impenetrable, but certainly a little bit more protective for common things. The flu every year at Xerox, I had to get a shot for the flu. It was not mandated, but it was highly suggested. And I think from a office standpoint, that's kind of a really important thing that you just called out. And I think how your landlord is handling that is probably going to influence people's decisions going forward about whether they stay or whether they move.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's communication, right? Not just with your people, but everything that affects you as a business, right? And Karen, you bring up a good point. We're in a multi-tenant building, my office, right? We haven't been there since March, but it's still there. And we do go in occasionally. And I do have to give, the landlord kudos, the property management team kudos, because they do have signs everywhere. They've limited people and how many people can go in the elevator. I see people all day long cleaning out the restrooms, wiping down, the railings. And what they do very well is they tell us, they inform us if they're doing something with the HVAC or something became a barrier and they wanted all the tenants to know. And so, like you said, Karen, I think it's important that employers take that information, share it with all their employees, because again, it's reinforcing the fact that as an employer, we are mindful of all of the safety issues. And as we start bringing people back, we want to bring them back in a safe work environment. And so I think transparency, as I mentioned before, transparency and the communication is key, not just with your people, but from everything, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think
We're getting to the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up on a final note. The final note really relates to, if as business leaders are watching this broadcast or the subsequent recording, what is the one takeaway that if you had your client or business leader sitting in front of you and you said, hey, this is the one thing you really should be considering right now? What is the one takeaway you would give to your client base for right now? And then long term, it's going to change, right? Because right now's advice probably isn't going to be good 6 months from now. So just right now, what is the biggest thing in your client base for your area of expertise that you would give to the audience? Let's start with Laura.
Well, I think it would be the same advice I would have given them prior, and that is listen to your employees, engage them in the process, asking them, Kelly definitely mentioned it, but, asking them what tools do you need to do your job effectively? What support just in general do you need to help you out in any way? And then, Kelly again brought up that, that mental wellness. We've been taught wellness. We've been talking about that in the work culture now for a while, and the importance of it. And so, now maybe even more so now than ever, just the burnout that we had already known was a real factor in the workplace. And now it may be really exacerbated. So I think your employees feeling valued is actually one of the best things any company can ever have. Okay. It's probably the highest valuable item. And that's what's going to really help create that culture. So engaging those employees in what's going to work for us, and then having that in respects to, all right, what's going to make our workplace be more successful for you and for the company in general.
Kelly, you want to tag on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with Laura 100%. So she just kind of did my spiel for me here. But, the one takeaway I think for employers from all of this and everything that, we all shared today is the flexibility in communication with your employees. And what I mean by flexibility, it's really considering everything, out of the box thinking right now, right? From office space to your office design to, employees' personal issues that they might be faced with, and being very authentic with them. Going to what Laura said, is authentic communication, transparency in your communication is, I think, very, very important, today.
And Karen, with you, let's do one takeaway. But before you do that, the commercial real estate industry has been so hammered on by all of this. And there's a lot of news and negativity and whatever. Maybe just touch on that as part of your takeaway.
Yeah. And, when I think the challenge is always that commercial real estate is seen as one industry, and it's really not. So if you look at retail, retail's struggling, and absolutely 100%, that is a challenged subset of commercial real estate. Industrial, if you think about warehousing and shipping, it is going through the roof right now. Right. So office, I think, is kind of getting knocked around a little bit in the press and in the media, because it's being kind of lobbed on to the fact that, well, nobody's in the office right now. Well, they forget the right now part of that. And I think that it's really important to understand that, I'm seeing, for example, I leased 40,000 square feet of new office space at 6100 Meriwether Drive, which is a brand new building at the top rents in the market. So I think I would caution people from reading too much into what you see in the news about the office market being dead. It's not dead. It is, and this is also my takeaway, and my advice to people, you need to think about your office space differently than you have in the past. It can't just be a decision on what's the lowest per square foot cost, because your office space is the creator of the culture within your organization. And that space needs to be your recruiting and retention tool for your employees to help further your business. So it needs to no longer be a per square foot conversation. That, I think this pandemic has helped to shift that, so that now people do understand our office space is more than just the space where my people work. It is a cultural hub. It is really the center of your organization and the pulse of your organization. And it's so important. So when you're thinking about, and this is my advice now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, when you're thinking about an office move, you really need to figure out what is the culture of your organization and what environment fits best with that, whether environment that is in, an urban hub like Baltimore or DC, or whether it's more of a suburban culture that has amenities within walkable distance that gives your employees enough of a comfort level that there's, safety, reducing commute times and things like that. So it's really a bigger decision than there are more factors in the decision than there ever have been before. And I think that's a good thing for the commercial real estate industry as a whole.
All right, and I'm going to put you totally on the spot. This is out of left field, so I know you're not prepared for this, but come on, can we get better rates right now on office space?
So I will answer. I'm not prepared to answer that question. I don't really have a politically correct answer, but those who know me well know that I typically don't always give the politically correct answer. But I will tell you that maybe it's a conversation with your landlord. Again, there are a lot of factors. Different landlords have different pain points as well. So right now is a great time to have really open and honest conversations with your landlord. I can't encourage that more, whether you have 10 years left on your lease or whether your lease expires, in January. Start talking to your landlord in new and different ways than you ever have, because you should be seeing your landlord as a partner in your company's success. And if your landlord isn't willing to engage in conversations that promote that partnership, then maybe you need to find a different landlord. And now is a great time to be starting and continuing those partnership kind of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there, ladies. That was really informative. I think pretty much anybody who's a business leader can get some takeaways from what we talked about today. And if you guys would like more information or would like to get a hold of these ladies, you can always visit smartwomenpros.com. And we'll wrap it up there. And we hope everybody has a great day. And stay tuned, because we will be posting this across social media on the replay. Have a great day, guys.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Susan.